Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into some fascinating research from the National Institutes of Health. It's all about something you've probably heard of, but might not know much about. Endocrine-disrupting chemicals, or EDCs for short.
Yeah, EDCs are basically these sneaky chemicals that can really mess with your hormones.
And as you can imagine, that can lead to a whole bunch of problems.
Exactly.
Now, I think a lot of people hear hormones and just think, oh, okay, whatever. But hormones actually play a huge role in how our bodies work.
They really do. They control everything from how we grow and develop to how our organs function and even our mood.
Right, it's not just about puberty and stuff like that.
No, not at all. And what's even more fascinating is that these EDCs, they don't need to be present in large amounts to cause problems. Even tiny, tiny amounts can disrupt the delicate balance of our hormones.
Oh, wow. Especially in children and developing fetuses, right?
Exactly. They're particularly vulnerable. Okay, so maybe, whatever, isn't the right reaction after all. This is starting to sound a little bit alarming. So where are we even encountering these EDCs? Where are they?
Well, that's the scary part. They're practically everywhere. We're talking everyday products like plastic containers and personal care products, even cleaning supplies and some types of food can contain EDCs.
Oh my gosh, so they're really all around us. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of how they work and what kind of health problems they can cause, let's take a step back for a second. What exactly are EDCs? How do they actually disrupt our hormones? Like, what's the mechanism there?
Okay, well, the simplest way to think about it is this. EDCs are chemicals that come from outside of the body. And when they get inside, they mess with how our hormones are supposed to work. You see, hormones are kind of like messengers. They send signals all throughout the body to keep things running smoothly. And EDCs can either mimic those messengers sending the wrong signals, or they can block the real hormones from getting their messages through.
So they're like, I don't know, like a telemarketer calling during dinner.
You're right.
You're either interrupting what you were doing or tricking you into thinking it's someone you actually want to talk to.
That's a great analogy.
Mm.
And just like with those annoying telemarketers, even a brief exposure to EDCs can disrupt the whole system.
Wow, that's a really good way to put it. So how long have we actually known about these EDCs? Is this a new discovery?
You know, it's interesting. The story actually begins way back in the mid-20th century, believe it or not. And it started with some very observant pig farmers.
Pig farmers. What do pigs have to do with EDCs?
Well, these farmers noticed that their pigs weren't reproducing as they should have been after eating some moldy grain.
Okay.
And it turned out that the mold actually contained naturally occurring EDCs. These are called mycoestrogens.
Huh. So it's not all synthetic chemicals then?
Right, both natural and synthetic EDCs exist. The pig farmer story, that was about a natural EDC. But a major wake-up call for the scientific community came with a synthetic estrogen called DES. That stands for diethylstilbestrol.
DES, I've heard of that.
Yeah, doctors used to prescribe it to pregnant women to prevent miscarriages. But later, it was discovered that daughters of those women had a much higher risk of developing a very rare vaginal cancer.
That's awful.
This is a real tragedy. And it really highlighted the long-term and devastating effects that EDCs can have.
Yeah, that sounds like a turning point in how we think about these chemicals.
It definitely was. Public awareness started to grow.
Yeah.
And you had books like Silent Spring by Rachel Carson and Our Stolen Future, which really focused on the environmental and health impacts of these chemicals.
Yeah, I thought those were classics.
And those events, along with growing scientific evidence, ultimately led to the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, which, as you know, works to protect us from harmful chemicals.
So we've known about the dangers of EDCs for decades now. I'm still a bit fuzzy on how they work, though. Are they just synthetic hormones? I mean, is that what makes them so disruptive?
That's a common misconception. EDCs aren't true hormones, although they can act like them in some ways. But there are some key differences.
Okay, can you break that down for us? What makes them different from our actual hormones?
Well, our bodies naturally produce hormones, right? And these hormones interact with very specific receptors in our cells. It's kind of like a key fitting into a lock. They also break down naturally, so they don't stick around in the body for too long.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do EDCs differ?
EDCs, on the other hand, they come from outside the body. And they're much less picky, you could say. They can interact with a variety of different receptors, even ones they're not meant for, and that can cause all sorts of unintended consequences. Plus, and here's the real kicker, they can accumulate in our bodies over time, so like they build up, and that can lead to even bigger problems down the road.
Okay, so they're like the bad house guest who overstays their welcome and trashes the place.
Exactly. And you mentioned earlier how they're found in so many everyday products.
Right. It's a little unsettling to think about.
It is. And it's no wonder there's growing concern about all the health problems that are linked to EDC exposure.
I can imagine. And we're talking about a wide range of problems, right? Not just one specific thing.
Exactly. A really wide range, from problems with reproduction and thyroid function to increased risk of obesity, diabetes, even certain types of cancer. It's a really vast and complex problem.
Wow. So this is definitely more than just an okay, whatever situation. Can you give us some specific examples of EDCs and how they mess with our health? I think I need to know what to watch out for here.
Sure. Let's start with alkylphenols. These are commonly found in things like detergents and shampoos, and they can mimic the effects of estrogen in the body. And some studies have linked them to an increased risk of breast cancer.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm definitely going to start paying more attention to those shampoo labels now. What other common products have these sneaky EDCs lurking in them?
You might be surprised to learn that phthalates, which are found in plastics and personal care products, have been linked to reproductive health problems. And then there are PCBs. These were widely used in paints and plastics before we really understood the danger.
Right, PCBs.
Yeah, they've been associated with a whole slew of problems, everything from developmental issues to thyroid disruption, problems with the immune system, infertility, and even cancer.
So it sounds like no system is really safe from these EDCs. Is there any part of us that's spared?
Well, it's true. EDCs can potentially disrupt many different systems in the body, but there are some that seem particularly vulnerable. For example, research suggests that EDCs can have a pretty significant impact on what's called the neurohypothalamic system.
Okay, the neuro what?
Neurohypothalamic system. This is the part of the brain that's responsible for regulating hormones and controlling lots of vital bodily functions.
So like the command center.
Exactly. And, we've always heard that the brain is incredibly complex and sensitive, especially during those early stages of development. So it makes sense that EDCs could really interfere with things there.
That makes sense.
And the statistics are pretty alarming. Some studies suggest that 1 in 8 children in India are suffering from neurodevelopmental disorders. And EDCs are considered to be a major contributing factor.
1 in 8. Wow, that's a huge number. How do these EDCs actually disrupt brain development, though? Like, what are they doing at the cellular level?
They can interfere with how brain cells connect with each other. They can disrupt the way neurotransmitters work. They can even change behavior. And this can lead to a whole range of problems like ADHD, anxiety, and learning difficulties.
It's amazing, and not in a good way, how these tiny little molecules can have such a profound effect. What specific EDCs are we talking about here when it comes to neurodevelopmental problems?
2 of the main culprits are PCBs, which we already mentioned, and PBDEs. Those are flame retardants that are commonly found in furniture and electronics. Now, it's important to note that studying the effects of EDCs on the human brain is super challenging.
I can imagine. It's not like you can just go poking around in there.
Exactly. So a lot of what we know comes from animal studies.
That makes sense. Ethical considerations would make it pretty difficult to study those effects directly in humans, especially children.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're also wondering about the thyroid. I bet you're thinking that's another system that takes a hit from EDCs, right?
You read my mind. The thyroid is essential, isn't it?
It is. It regulates metabolism and growth, and unfortunately, EDCs can really mess with how it produces and uses hormones.
So a full-on endocrine disruption. What are some of the most common EDCs we should be looking out for when it comes to our thyroids?
Well, some of them are hiding in some very common products. Perchlorate, for example. That's found in things like fireworks and airbags.
Really? Fireworks?
Yep. And it can block the uptake of iodine, which is crucial for making thyroid hormone.
Oh, wow.
And then there are thiocyanates. Those are found in cigarette smoke, and they do the same thing. They interfere with iodine uptake.
Okay, so smoking is bad for a whole host of reasons, it seems.
It really is. And even isoflavones, which are naturally occurring compounds found in soy, can potentially disrupt thyroid function in some people if consumed in large amounts.
Wait, soy? But I thought soy was supposed to be healthy.
It can be. Soy has a lot of nutritional benefits, but like anything, it's all about balance. I think the bigger culprits when it comes to thyroid disruption are probably things like PCBs, which we've already talked about.
Those can mimic or block thyroid hormones, and they can also cause neurotoxicity. And then BPA, that can block thyroid hormone action, and it's actually been linked to ADHD.
So we're back to brain development again.
It's all connected.
This is really making me rethink everything in my kitchen. What about obesity and other metabolic disorders? Are those connected to EDCs as well?
They are. And this is where the concept of obesogens comes in. Obesogens are EDCs that can increase the risk of obesity, even if the exposure happens early in life.
Obesogens. That sounds ominous.
It is a bit, right? It's almost like they're reprogramming the body to store fat more easily.
So it's not just about what you eat and how much you exercise. These chemicals can actually change how your metabolism works. Exactly. EDCs can interfere with the body's natural systems for regulating things like fat storage and energy balance. Some EDCs, for example, they can actually trick the body into creating more fat cells.
Wow.
And others can mimic estrogen and actually increase the production of fat.
So even if you're doing everything right, eating healthy and exercising, these chemicals can still make it harder to maintain a healthy weight.
It's true, and it's